Welcome to Mastering the Moment, a 10-minute self-improvement podcast focusing on insights to respond to life's challenges. My name is Heidi Addick. I am a coach, trainer, consultant here at Dewpoint in Hong Kong. Our podcast today is focusing on managing expectations. And from what we understand about conflicts, we know that one of the causes of conflicts can be expectations not being met, that there's a disappointment from things not going our way or the way that we expected. So why do we need to manage expectations? Well, let me start with a story. And it was a client of ours that we encountered. They were in technology and we were training the project managers. And what we discovered was that the project managers, of course, would try to manage the scope of the project. And they would do that by telling the customer when things were out of scope. But the problem was that the customer would bypass the project managers and go directly to their CEO, the top management. The CEO would come down and say, you do it, go ahead with it, which would end up violating their project scope. So this was the challenge that the project managers had. And the problem was that once the CEO kept saying yes, creating a precedent that the customer would be able to get their way, regardless of what was stated as project scope. The end result was that they did a lot of additional work that they were not paid for, and timelines would be blown out. So this is why we need to manage expectations. And managing expectations is not just down to one party, as we could hear from this story. How do we manage expectations? Well, I think there's two sides that we need to look at. There's the side of the person making the request, setting the requirements, and then there's the side of the person fulfilling those needs, fulfilling those requests. And they are managing expectations of what's possible or what can be done. From the side of the person making the request, setting the requirements. What are you looking for? You need a clear specification, listing out all the requirements. But then you also need to make sure that your communication is clear. Ideally, we can communicate verbally, whether it's on the phone or in person, face-to-face. But that allows for a two-way conversation, a two-way dialogue. So that way we can ask questions and we can clarify things. So not just relying on writing things down. To communicate the expectations that are required, I think we can leverage the question words, the 5 W's and the 1 H, to profile those expectations. So we can start with, why do we need this? Why are we making this request? What's the rationale behind it? What's the context? What does the final result look like? How does this fit in with the other work that's being done? Who is involved? Who are the stakeholders? Who are the end users? And then the when, what is the timing in terms of deadlines, duration, frequency, deliverables? And then the H for how, that represents the process. So how are we going to accomplish that goal? And then thinking about the resources required. So we can use these question words to sort of structure those expectations, the specification, what we're looking for. From the side of the person fulfilling the request, fulfilling the needs, to manage expectations, what we want to do is limit the potential for disappointment. So we need to clearly indicate what is possible and what is not possible, what is in scope and what is out of scope. Provide explanations. Give some indication of what's the policy or requirements from a regulatory standpoint or the process, give guidance and clarification on how things tend to get done. Now let's start with saying what is possible, what is not possible. For me, this is setting expectations, right? This is being able to state what is possible. And part of that is to state what is not possible as well. There is this tendency that we will avoid talking about negatives, right? We don't want to start with the negatives, but if we don't clearly indicate what are the boundaries, if people fully don't understand how the work gets done, then they will continue to ask for things that are beyond possibility. So it's important to set those expectations and indicate what may require some additional costs or input or resource differences. So let me give some wording examples. Like, this is what we can do. I'm afraid the technology hasn't been developed for us to do X. Or for compliance reasons, we're not able to provide that kind of information, indicating what is possible and what's not possible. And then we have to give explanations. So don't just stop there. We have to give the explanations. There is this tendency for us to think of the customer as king and to avoid setting those boundaries. What we want to do is to make sure that we don't say yes and then inevitably disappoint them. When we say that there is a limitation, then we add this explanation. This is the reason for it. What is that explanation? So let me give an example. I've worked with different embassies and consulates in order to proactively manage expectations of their customers, the people who would come into the consulate. They provided a lot of clear communication, starting with their website and then going to the physical locations of the consulate, the waiting area, and then also at the counter. These explanations would provide some information about turnaround times or what was required for applying for the visas. Not only that, they trained their people to have those explanations ready so that they could explain why something might not be possible. For example, that a document needs to be sent back to the home country to get approved, or because of shipping times, it takes time, or providing alternatives so that in case they need something urgently, there is an option available, such as an emergency visa or passport, but it has an additional cost. So another scenario where we will need to manage expectations, or we frequently encounter, is when an employee asks for a promotion or a raise. And in this case, we can use GROW as a guide to our communication. GROW stands for goals, reality check, opportunity, and the way forward. And we use this as a guide to our discussion with that team member. And I think that's a really great way for a manager to manage the expectations of that team member without necessarily rejecting them outright. So if the employee has come and said that they would like a promotion or a raise, then we start with the goal. What would they like to achieve? Where are they going? What's their direction? And then if they want to go in that direction, what is required? What are the duties that they need to be able to demonstrate, or the skills that they need to be able to develop to fulfill that role? Then we go into the reality check and we identify what are the gaps in the performance. How much of the job description are they covering at the moment? And how much is missing? Or how much do they need to learn? That brings us to the opportunity to grow, the opportunity to learn, or the opportunity to demonstrate those skills more frequently. And then the way forward, setting a plan or a timeline for how they can learn that, or how they can demonstrate that, or when they will be able to be considered for that promotion or raise. So we use that grow model to guide the communication, but what we're doing is also managing the expectation of that employee. So that was our episode on managing expectations. And stay tuned for our next episode in our Mastering the Moment series, where we're going to talk about how our reactions affect our communication. If you have a story or a case to share, or if you have any questions, feel free to contact me.